Are you thinking of buying a home in San Antonio? Well, let me tell you, there are some properties that look like they are amazing deals, but they could have issues, serious issues that could cost you tens of thousands of dollars in the long run. Well, and I've seen houses that are only a couple years old that have had these problems if they're not taken care of, from the beginning. Today, I'm going to save you some serious headaches by showing you exactly what types of home you should never buy in San Antonio. By the way, my name is Michael McCall, born and raised right here in the San Antonio area, and I help families just like you find their perfect home in the San Antonio area, at all the suburbs surrounding San Antonio. For this video, I want to make sure that y'all stay to the end, because that very last point that I'm going to talk about is one that I guarantee you're probably not thinking about when you're looking for a home in San Antonio. Let's start with one of the biggest issues that I do see in some of these older homes in the city. First off is homes with galvanized piping. So galvanized piping is a big issue in really older homes, right? Because, currently we use PEX piping. There's not any galvanized piping that's currently used in homes. Before PEX piping, it was copper piping. Before copper piping, it was galvanized piping. So you're talking homes that are probably 30 plus, probably way older than 30 years old, probably closer to 40, 50 years old, right? But there are a decent amount of those in San Antonio. 20% of the current homes for sale in the San Antonio market right now were built before 1980. So there is a significant amount that was built newer and shouldn't have this issue. It may look fine and everything is good at first, but eventually those pipes start to rust out. San Antonio has very hard water, so all the calcium and minerals in the water itself will really deteriorate those pipes quickly. So you have to, keep that water softener going, get some filtration going, but even then, it doesn't always completely fix these issues with galvanized piping. So if you do have to get this done, you're probably looking at a cost of like $10,000 to $20,000 plus depending on the size of the homes and the entire scope of the replacement of the piping in the home itself. Good way to prevent this, of course, is to get the inspection. A lot of these houses do have crawl spaces, so if they get up underneath the crawl space, you can see the galvanized piping pretty obviously, or getting up in the attic if it is a slab foundation. But again, like I said, this is a very rare thing, so it's not something I would completely be freaking out about unless you're looking at specifically a really older home, maybe one of the historic districts of San Antonio. Next point is probably the one that I hear the most concerns about when it comes to homes in San Antonio, and that is foundation problems. This is another sneaky hidden cost, a hidden problem that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars very quickly. It's all about the type of soil that the house is on, right? There's different areas of San Antonio that I don't hardly see any issues at all, especially once you get up into the hill country where it's very rocky, right? You're essentially building the house on limestone bedrock, and it doesn't really move and shift a lot. When you get further south of town, you get some of those sandier soils. That stuff doesn't expand and contract, especially in the little pie shape where what I like to call the foundation pie, which is basically I-10 going from San Antonio to Houston, basically going all the way to Seguin, and 35 going from San Antonio to New Braunfels. So that area between 10 and 35 is one of the areas that has the most problem. All of these areas have this black dirt where essentially the soil expands and contracts quite a bit depending on the droughts and how much rain we get. That's why you hear people talking about watering your foundation whenever you are trying to avoid the foundation issues. So you look at these problems that come up, and that soil is essentially drying up and it shrinks up, right? It leaves these gaps in between the soil and the foundation, so you can have some settling and it kind of moves a little bit. And then whenever it rains, it swells back up, and you can have some of the soil pushing at like 14,000 pounds per square inch on the foundation. So it's going to push it up a little bit more, and then as it's kind of holding on one side, you can start to get these cracks in the foundation, and it's just making your foundation do all kinds of crazy things. So there's a million different things that you can do to mitigate these foundation problems, but this is probably the biggest one. Or if you find a house that has foundation problems from the beginning, if it's not already corrected, you're looking at cost of anywhere from like $5,000 on the very low end all the way up to like $30,000 to correct this. After hearing about the galvanized piping and foundation problems, you may be thinking, hey, I'll just avoid this altogether and I'll go get a brand new home. Well, before I burst your bubble on that, do me a quick favor and subscribe. I talk about all the new neighborhoods, everything you need to know about what it's like to move to and live in the San Antonio area. All right, so with San Antonio growing so quickly, it is very plain to see that the affordable housing is going up everywhere. That is one of the big drawing points of San Antonio, is its affordable housing. Our median price point is below $300,000. What you have to worry about with these types of homes, especially the lower priced homes, is the major issues that can come up with buying a cheaply built house. This isn't just one specific builder or a couple specific builders either. I know y'all are probably thinking of some specific builder in your own mind whenever I say cheaply built house, and I'm not talking about that. I've seen homes from one builder that have been just absolutely amazing in the same neighborhood as homes that are just terrible. I mean, like literally in the same neighborhood, same builder, just different construction crews. So it is all about what you're looking at whenever you go to buy that home. Making sure you hire the best inspector you can possibly have, and even maybe multiple inspectors to do different things, looking at the HVAC, looking at the roof, looking at, you know, maybe even the plumbing if you're concerned about that, foundation, all that stuff. There's no sense in holding back. You can get whatever inspections done that you want done on the home. They can't tell you no on those types of things. But it's just a matter of being comfortable, making sure that you're moving forward with a home that is actually built correctly, because those issues can pile up in the long run. First, it starts with, you know, just some cracks in the caulking. Then, okay, a couple tiles start cracking. Oh shoot, then some doors start sticking. Then there's a plumbing leak. Then there's an HVAC issue. Then the builder's not calling you back with these warranty requests. And you know, it just starts spiraling over and over and over again until eventually you're just like, I'm in a pit, a money pit with this cheaply built house. Even though I've got all of these warranties and all these great things that I thought were gonna help me out not have this problem, you're in a home that you spent a little bit of money on when you could have, you know, gone maybe $50,000 to $75,000 higher, not changed your monthly payment that much, but you're in a much better quality built home that you're not having to deal with any of these problems with. Next is another thing I get a ton of questions on, just because San Antonio is so prone to this, and that is flood zones. I always recommend do not buy a house in a flood zone if you don't have to. If you buy a house that just has even a little bit of the house in the flood zone, you're gonna be paying a ton of extra money for flood insurance. You're gonna be risking all of your possessions. You're gonna be risking your family, because these flash floods that happen in San Antonio can happen in the blink of an eye. The biggest concerns happen with homes that are older homes, because the current developments, they don't build them anywhere near flood zones. If there are, they completely build them away from the FEMA flood zones. They look at those maps and they design the entire development around to stay away from that flood zone specifically. The older homes are ones where, you know, they're right along creek beds or they're low water crossings, and you know, you get these flash floods like we did have not too long ago, where there were some serious fatalities where you had this flash flood come through and we got, I think it was like 6 or something inches of rain in a matter of an hour or two. And it was just it was one of the heaviest, quickest rainfalls that San Antonio has ever recorded. And there were multiple fatalities because of that, because it just happened so quickly. And again, that is just something you don't want to deal with for your family. If it's in a flood zone and you're buying this house, it has to be disclosed on the seller's disclosure. But even if it's disclosed that it's not in a flood zone, always go to FEMA and check that specifically. You can look at that, every single address, you can look at everything in the entire state of Texas, entire country for the FEMA flood zone, and see exactly where this house that you're looking at is in relation to the flood zones that are nearby it. Now, while flood zones are a truly natural risk, our next category is completely man-made. So let's talk about poorly flipped homes. San Antonio, being a super affordable market, is incredibly popular for people trying to buy and flip property. In fact, a recent statistic that I saw, which is kind of crazy, is that 11% of all home sales are actually recently flipped properties. Average profit for flippers in San Antonio is just over $12,000, which makes it one of the lowest profit margins in the entire country for major metro areas. So, as you can imagine, these flippers that are trying to make some money by flipping these houses are going to start cutting corners as much as they possibly can to increase their profit margins as much as they can. They may focus more on the cosmetic things, and if there are major issues, they may try to find somebody that's the cheapest and the fastest rather than somebody that is the highest quality. Cover up those foundation problems and cover up those plumbing and electrical problems that are already there. Another thing that I didn't even think to mention yet was the permits. If it's in the city limits, there very well could have been a home flipped without any permits pulled for the work that was done, and that's a major issue that's going to come back on you if you buy that home without checking to make sure that those permits were pulled. So that's all part of the title search and everything, and making sure that that those things are taken care of, but verifying directly with the sellers, with the flippers, that all permits were pulled and that they can provide documentation for that. is incredibly important too. So far we've talked about major problems with the home itself, but we have not talked about the specific location problems of what could cause issues with you actually living in the home. And this comes with buying a home that is very near or right on a highway or a train track. And even something else that not a lot of people think of is near the military bases. Air traffic can be a big nuisance, especially if you're inside the home and you can hear or feel the vibrations or the rumblings of just the noise in general from the trains or the cars and traffic driving by, especially if it's highway traffic with 18-wheelers and heavy trucks driving by constantly. It can be a major problem. Unless you have already lived in this type of situation before, I would definitely rethink buying a home that is right on one of these areas. And long-term resale value is going to drastically affect your resale value long-term. Those houses do not go up in value like homes that are comparable that are not near these areas, that are more quiet, more suburban, just more city streets, and neighborhood street traffic. What I would recommend for you guys, if you are looking at a home and is specifically on one of these areas, go during multiple times a day so you can actually see what it's like. Because you're looking at the house one time, you're not gonna be able to live there until you actually buy the home, but you wanna know and feel and understand what the nuisance can be with the amount of noise that you're gonna be dealing with this kind of location. Now let's talk some more about new construction and more problems that can come with buying a new construction home. If you buy and are the first ones to buy in a brand new subdivision, there are some problems that can arise with that. There's also a lot of benefits, okay? So what I always see, especially in some of these big ones, like we've talked about on this channel, Mayfair in New Braunfels, Barramundi in New Braunfels, Esperanza in Bernie. I mean, some of these big, huge master plan communities that are very, very popular. If you buy early on in that construction process, just think about the construction that you're gonna be dealing with for years and years and years to come. Very similar to what we just talked about with the noise issues, with the location being close to highways, train tracks, or air traffic. The noise from construction all throughout the day, it's a lifestyle interrupter. You're also going to be buying into a neighborhood that has no amenities, but you're going to be paying the HOA dues as if you do have the amenities, and you might not have those amenities for 2, 3, 4 years potentially, depending on how long the construction process takes. And if you buy a home in phase 1 of construction and maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, or even a year later, worst case, you end up, something happens and you get relocated for work, or life changes and you have to move across the country again. You trying to sell that home and competing with the builder is going to be very, very challenging. And I tell everybody this, if you're not planning on staying in that house for 3 to 5 years at least, I do not recommend buying new construction. Find an older home that you can buy. That way, if you are moving in the next 1, 2, 3 years, you can actually, potentially have some kind of appreciation with it, but you're gonna be buying at elevated prices when you buy new construction. That is how new construction makes money on it. If you bought that home and a year later tried to sell it, you could not sell it for the same price that the builders are currently selling that home for, or what you bought that home for a year previously, unless the market has just exploded and gone up by 10, 15% in a single year, which we all know is pretty much impossible for that to happen again like it did a few years ago. So you're going to be losing money. There's fees associated with selling the houses, whether it's realtor fees, whether it's closing fees, attorney fees, escrow fees, like all those things cost money, and you're not going to be able to add those fees on top of what you're selling the house for whenever you're competing with the builder. Look at homes and communities that are on the later phases of development, maybe towards the tail end, or buy a resale in that neighborhood. Take the advantage of some of the people that made the mistakes already and bought the house. You could get a better price on it, even though you may not be getting all the incentives that the builder is offering. You can get a better price than what the builder is going to be offering. Next up is a pretty obvious one too, but don't buy a house with an old roof, okay? And there's a couple reasons for that. One, if it's an old roof, you could have leaks, and of course, roof replacements are extremely costly. You're looking at $15,000, $20,000 on the minimum for smaller homes, all the way up to $40,000, $50,000 if you're in a big, much bigger, larger home. But not only older roofs are a problem, hail damaged roofs are another big problem. A lot of people, especially looking at moving to San Antonio, always ask me what are the major weather problems that San Antonio has. Well, flooding is one, but that is not near as big of an issue or as common of an issue as hailstorms. We don't really get tornadoes. We don't have any issues with really hurricanes coming from the coast. Well, occasionally you'll see a tornado that comes through, but it's a very, very smaller one, and it's usually a small little area. It's nothing like up north in the Dallas area or up in the Tornado Alley kind of situation. But the hailstorms that come through relatively frequently, every spring, April, May timeframe usually, and they always take with them several roofs, right? And several neighborhoods full of roofs in a lot of cases. So you're going to have issues with, potential, damage where you have roof leaks. If you buy a house with a damaged roof and try to go get it fixed with your own insurance, they're not gonna cover it, and you're gonna be stuck out of pocket paying for that new roof on your own dime. And nobody ever wants to deal with that. So you always get that roof inspected. If it has any kind of hail damage whatsoever, you get the seller to either pay for that new roof if they can't get insurance to cover it, or you make sure that it's repaired so that those sections that were damaged with hail don't have any issues. There are several main areas that you need to look at whenever it comes to these roofs and these hailstorms. A lot of it is out on the far west side and then on that north side of San Antonio. Kind of that hill country area, that edge of that hill country is where you see a majority of these hailstorms come through. So lastly, we are going to talk about this final issue that I mentioned in the beginning that hardly anybody ever thinks about, but can completely affect and negatively affect at that, how you can actually use your home and specifically your backyard. When it comes to Texas, we are a very, very hot state. For those of you coming from California or coming from up north, you know that Texas is hot. If you want to be out there and enjoying your backyard that you're moving to Texas for, you're gonna wanna find some shade, okay? And I'll say this, Texas is definitely hot and the weather is definitely hot, especially in the summer. But if you have a shaded property or you're just out in the shade in general, it's really not too bad. That heat is not as humid most of the time. It's mostly a drier heat compared to like the Houstons or especially down by the Gulf Coast. However, you do want to have some shade in the backyard. So do not buy a house. I highly recommend do not buy a house that is west facing on the backyard. So if you have a west facing backyard and you like to be outside, especially even if you have a pool, that sun is going to be beating down on you to death. And it's going to be baking you as soon as you walk outside in those July and August month, June, really May through September probably. But if you have an east-facing backyard and you have lots of shade in the backyard in the afternoons, you can get out there and actually enjoy being out there. The temperature difference is usually like 10 to 15 degrees cooler in the shade compared to being in the sunlight directly. So it makes a massive difference. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had people that haven't even thought about this and then have started to pay attention to it, and it completely changes the type of home and the location of the home that they're looking at. They'll even look at homes that may look great, but they got a west-facing backyard and they've just completely write it off the list. So it saves you a lot of time when you're looking for homes, and it'll save you a lot of headache whenever you go to actually live in that home and try to enjoy it. Because I can tell you from personal experience, my in-laws used to have a house that had the backyard facing west. They had this huge patio, but they had to have all of these shades that covered everything. And even then, we waited till pretty much 7, 8 o'clock at night, whenever the sun was down, kind of getting below the horizon, to go out there to actually be able to enjoy their pool, their back patio, barbecue, grilling, all that stuff. We had to wait, stay inside the entire rest of the time. It was not a fun situation, and they immediately moved to a house, guess what, with an east-facing backyard because of that exact reason. So there you have it. We've talked about everything from the pipes under your feet to the roofs over your head and everything in between. Now, of course, this does not mean that San Antonio doesn't have any great homes to look at. These are just some of the few major issues that you need to be cognizant of and understanding of whenever you are looking to buy a home in the San Antonio area. Now guys, I've lived here my entire life. I was born and raised here in the San Antonio area. I know all the ins and outs of all these problems like we already talked about, all the best builders that you can be looking for if you're looking at new construction, some of the best areas, if you're looking at some of the best places to move with your family. You just want to talk about all these different things and what it takes and what it's like to move to San Antonio. You can reach out. Would love to start a conversation with you guys. You can email me. My information is down below in that description. You can also schedule a call to talk with me at any point in time. Would love to get to know you guys and help you with this move and this transition down here to San Antonio. And if you are curious about some of the details of some of San Antonio's best and worst suburbs, take a look at this video I did right here. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.